The Night Springs Cemetery by Jared Krall. An orange sun lowered steadily into a pit of evergreen teeth, valiantly spilling its last light upon the Night Springs Cemetery while it still could. If he had noticed, middle-aged Simon Willis might find himself grateful for this light, so he might continue overlooking his mother's grave in peace. After all, the cemetery was dangerous after dark. Not for any mysterious reason, mind you. The forest outlining Night Springs Cemetery was one of the only places wolf sightings have been reported in all of Pennsylvania. You know about the wolves, don't you? Simon jumped at the voice and twisted his body at the intruder with anger. He managed to calm himself as he recognized the kindly-looking old man who approached him as the groundskeeper for the cemetery. His cold annoyance further melted when he saw the old man raising his hands in apologetic surrender. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you like that. I assumed my creaky legs would have given me away for a mile." The old man laughed and continued to approach, as Simon allowed himself a small grin for the first time all day. For a minute, the groundskeeper stared silently at the grave beside him, in solemn reverence. Despite politely declining similar offers from friends and family, Simon appreciated the man's company here. The groundskeeper brought a sense of practiced officiality to Simon's mourning, and gave him a reason to stay rooted to the spot. The man even seemed to know the appropriate time to break the silence. "I dug this grave, you know. I dig all the graves round here. Keeps my body younger than I really am," he said, eyes winking with pride. It was true too. Simon knew the man was well into his 80s at least, because he remembered the sight of him as a child. He didn't seem to have aged much in that time. He looked like he could just barely be approaching 60. "I've had this job for 40 years now. Got it from my father after he died. I must have been about the same age as you when it happened. My name's Jeremy Carter. If you're wondering what to call me, plain Carter does most people just fine." "Carter," Simon repeated vaguely. "How'd your father pass, if you don't mind me asking?" No, it's fine. He just got tired of living, I suppose. Probably smoked too much tobacco and buried too many good people." He changed the subject here. "I didn't know your mum much. Could recognize her from passing in town, but I never knew her name or nothing. I heard she was taken by cancer?" "Yeah." Simon's voice sounded so hollow, and he wondered if that's how it'd always sound from now on. "Terrible way to go, cancer. Wasting by inches. You're tired of hearing this, but you have my sympathies all the same." Carter was right. The thanks that tumbled out of Simon's mouth was smoothed from overuse. The word felt like an overworked muscle, raw and lifeless, and Simon wanted nothing more than to hide away from all the apologetic well-wishing that demanded response, and give the word time to rest until its meaning could be salvaged once more. Simon wanted to talk about his mum to this man. He even managed to push out a forced "she" before he realised he had no words to follow it, and found his throat dry. Somehow the old man seemed to understand this, and brought the subject closer to his mother. "I know your mother always lived here, so am I right in assuming you grew up in Night Springs too?" The question offered direction, and Simon gratefully seized upon it. "Yeah, I never knew my dad, so I grew up here alone with my mum." He corrected himself. "Well, not alone, you know. There's a whole town, of course, and I used to know just about everybody here. My mum never had another kid, or remarried though, so it was always just the two of us in the house." Simon paused a moment, reflecting, then realised he needed to speak more to properly convey his mother. "It was great though. My mum was a great woman. The house was small compared to others, but just fine for the two of us. And my mum worked her ass off to make sure we always had it. Mr. Anderson at the bank, I don't know if he still works there anymore. He wasn't at the funeral today. Mr. Anderson was always good enough to give my mum an extension on the loan if she needed it. He helped out a lot when I was going through college. My mum had 2 jobs back then, so I wouldn't have to do any work myself and could focus on my education. I got a business degree and then went to law school, and later became a lawyer working out of Chicago. I stopped seeing her in the town so much since then. I tried to come back for the holidays, but something started coming up, and I missed more than I ever should have allowed. I was crushed when I found out my mum had cancer. I tried to get her to move in with me, get her better medical care, but she was dead set on staying in Night Springs. She always loved this town. I couldn't wait to get to college, but she was always happy living here. I thought of moving closer, of course, but I couldn't just abandon all my clients and practice. And my mum insisted Debbie next door was taking good care of her. They were like sisters to each other. I offered to pay Debbie as a nurse, but she wouldn't hear of it. You know how people in this town are. The two men grinned in shared understanding for a moment. The sun was nowhere to be seen now. You could make out some orange lingering in the night right at the edge of the horizon, but no more than that. It was getting very dark. She fought for a while. I am very proud of her. 7 months later, though, that was it. I visited a lot in that time, at least a dozen times, though never more than for a weekend. Still, I just figured she'd pull through it somehow. I never let myself consider that she actually might go like this until the last couple of weeks. Simon realised he was finished. The man clasped him on the shoulder and said, "You were a good son. I talked to Debbie, and she told me that all your mama'd do is talk about you and how hard you were trying. She's very proud of you." Simon didn't cry, but he couldn't speak either. A long pause, and then Carter broke the silence once more. "Well, I best be leaving now. A gravekeeper's work is always plentiful. You best be getting back soon too. They howl up a storm some nights, but I've never known the wolves to actually attack anyone unprovoked. There ain't no lights round here though, and you best be careful if you want to be avoiding cracking your head on someone's grave." "Thanks. I'll be heading out soon. If it's okay, I think I might stay another couple of minutes." Carter patted the man's shoulder one last time and said, "Of course, son." With that, he dipped away through the moonless night, leaving Simon to mourn his mother in solitude once more. Simon was good to his word. He waited a few minutes. He thought some final words to his mother, hoping she would hear them, wherever she was. He tried to remember every good time they ever had together, and did his best to press out intruding images of his sickly mother wasting away on her deathbed. He was just about to leave when he heard the scream. A howl was heard just moments before, then a quick shout, followed by agonizing screams of a voice he recognized. "Mr. Carter!" he shouted, running in the direction of the screams as they grew more frenzied. It didn't take long for the small black headstone to trip him up, sending him hurtling into a freshly dug grave. Simon Willis died instantly. Only 50 paces away, shrouded in darkness, an old man tossed his dog a treat. His throat was a bit raw from screaming, but he made sure to say, "Good boy," to his pet wolf for acting on cue. Slowly and methodically, Jeremy Carter made his way through the labyrinth of graves, and finally approached the one he had finished an hour ago. He had filled the bottom with wooden spikes about 3 feet tall, placed every 6 inches or so. He shook his head in mild disappointment as he peered at the body, punctured and bloody. He was a good kid, he thought. Almost wanted him to just run and save himself. A strange thought for Carter. Maybe he had buried too many good people. Still, he drank deeply from the energy leaving the man's body, and moaned in relief as his ailing joints seemed to strengthen somewhat. Maybe he'd call it quits soon. But his father was only 120 when he passed, and he was determined to make it a bit longer than that. Besides, a gravekeeper's work is always plentiful. A wolf howled into the night, as Jeremy Carter set about filling the hole he had made in the earth.
Walmond Cranberry, a young keeper of a now decrepit lighthouse on the coast of Delsark, met his untimely fate through unfortunate circumstances, albeit strange ones. A heavy mist had rolled in on the craggy shores, and the sea was practically invisible under its shroud. As on every other night, nights akin to this one especially so, Walmond ascended the multi-story staircase to the beacon and ignited its light, shining pillars of light down into the treacherous waters. This was a job for which Walmond was highly qualified and experienced, over only a decade. 30 years of age at the time of his death, and with much knowledge regarding safety standards. It is surprising and somehow eerie that his death came to him by the way of tumbling from the top of the flight of stairs and not stopping until reaching the ground floor. His pummeled remains would have been unidentifiable if not for the fact that he was the only person who had recently inhabited the lighthouse. The word recently is an accurate modifier in this scenario, for the lighthouse is very old. Constructed in the late 19th century, the Delsark Lighthouse was originally surrounded by a clutch of smaller houses inhabited by simple but peaceful townsfolk. Not only this, but the town, at first called Dill's Ark, so called because of a seaside ark carved into the coastal crag. The name comes from the mad founder of the town, Dylan Harrington, was formerly a moderately popular centre of commerce, producing reasonable but not exceptional amounts of seafood. Dylan Harrington, a hideous man with a low brow and soft nose, and dull eyes which were almost red, commissioned the construction of the lighthouse at the highest peak of Dill's Ark. This, of course, was highly reasonable. Ships returning to port would undoubtedly need a beacon to guide them safely through dangerous waters. What was not expected from the unnecessary construction of a deep concrete neck extending from the lighthouse's base under the ground and leading to a circular chamber. In time, citizens of Dill's Ark began to disappear without a trace. At the same time, the remaining inhabitants became increasingly uneasy at Dylan Harrington's wild vagaries. Oftentimes, he could be sighted creeping, as if in a daze, from street to street at midday. At dusk, he retreated to his lighthouse and screamed from a high window in a voice that was only vaguely reminiscent of human vocal patterns. Despite his unpredictability, Dylan Harrington maintained his humanity by frequently engaging in polite conversation with passersby, while aimlessly lurking. Notably, those with whom he spoke tended to vanish in the following days. The mob terrified citizens, those who hadn't vacated the town that is, eventually surrounded the Dill's Ark lighthouse and demanded entry, only to be verbally assaulted and threatened by the undeniably lunatic Harrington within the heavy walls of the lighthouse. In time, the townsfolk managed to tear away the front door and ploughed inside, discovering that the Harrington was nowhere to be found. However, a particularly keen citizen noticed a crooked floor panel. Sure enough, upon peeling it away, the mob uncovered an immensely deep secret passage, leading into interminable depths of darkness. A brave few descended the creaky wooden ladder, returning minutes later as impossibly disturbed things. They never spoke of what they found in that inimitable chamber, but it is known that they returned with cold blood staining up to their shins. In modern times, Delsark is a dead town with a dead lighthouse. Ships no longer sail into port, and all visits are rare and only with one purpose: to witness the so-called phantom light. Years after Walmond Cranberry's death, the lighthouse has fallen into a state of disrepair, and currently has no keeper to speak of. However, this has apparently not kept the beacon from igniting every now and then, with no evident cause. It shines as it always used to, with vast pillars of light falling onto the ravenous sea, but only shines periodically throughout the night. When infrequently it shines periodically between on and off, and then dulls completely for another randomly given amount of time. Logic dictates that this should be impossible, not only because there is no keeper, but also because the electricity is being disconnected from the dead town for 5 years. Tourists assume by legendary that the spirit of Walmond Cranberry is to blame, and several of them have snapped photographs of the lit beacon in an attempt to capture a ghostly figure, and many have succeeded, although the figure's features have always been indistinguishable from such a distance. Camera hanging from a loose cord around my neck, I ran to open the locked door and stumbled into the dark. A musty odour wafted into my nose, reminiscent of old times and strange incidents. Once my eyes adjusted to the dark, I ventured further into the abandoned lighthouse. Every step I took towards the spiral steps creaked uncomfortably, and in more than one place I felt the wooden floor sagging into a passage, but it held me well enough. Step by step up the stairs, I could imagine the noises that must have been made when Wellman had his horrible fall. The rapid clanging of flesh and bone on metal, coupled with his grisly screams, and finally, crushing impact of his skull against the hard plaster wall at the end of the steps. The thought made me shiver, but drove my morbid curiosity and encouraged me to ascend with a nervously pounding heart. I was here for one reason: to snap a photograph of the beacon room while lit, to discern the features of Wellman's spirit. A trap door was at the top of the steps, latched flimsily down. I placed my hands against it and pushed my whole body upward, bending the wood and provoking creaking and cracking sounds. As soon as I did so, there came another, less expected sound, racing footsteps above me. For a moment I stumbled back a bit, listening for any further disturbances. When I confided that there was none, I attempted again by forcing off the trapdoor. All at once it gave way, and I threw myself into the blinding beacon room. A chilling breeze surrounded my body for a number of seconds, but then quickly dissipated. I paid no attention to it, too obsessed with starting up my camera and finding a good vantage point where I could snap a photograph. With haste, I pressed my back against the glass facing away from the beacon and pointed my camera towards the light. Pressing a little black button, I captured a picture of not only the beacon, but the trapdoor beside it. But something was dreadfully wrong. There did stand in the picture an apparition, but it was not alone, nor was it Wellman Cranberry. There were two phantomistic apparitions, and the one standing was a markedly ugly man with a low, hairy brow and a flat and squishy nose. The other apparition, being thrown down the steps by the former figure, was unmistakably Wellman Cranberry. I stared, shaking, as I realised who the former was: Dylan Harrington. The realisation was accompanied by the sudden dying of the beacon, and I was immersed in darkness. A sudden coldness overwhelmed me, and I listened in terror as the trapdoor slammed shut.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.